Hello everyone, this is Lugnuts. Whenever I build a rail network, I use a dragging signal distance of 2. This means that a signal will be placed on every other tile of track, and that's standard for OpenTTD coop games as well. So why is a signal on every other tile of track the best option? Simply put, a higher signal density allows our tracks to carry more trains. So on the top right, we have the default signal density of 1 per 6 tiles, and we can see that this can only support 3 trains, and that's because between every pair of trains there has to be a 6 tile gap, or actually an 8 tile gap counting the 2 signals. But when we have a signal density of 2, we can have a gap of 3 tiles between each train, and that allows 4 trains to move seamlessly on this loop. We can take this even further by building a signal on every single tile. However, now we have a problem. We no longer have room to split off another line without removing a signal. And we can see that can cause jams. That train had to slow down now because of that signal gap, and now all the trains are coming to stops. There is a way around this, and that's by using a Y-shaped split like this. However, every single split and merge would have to be in this shape, and that's not really practical. So we stick to a signal on every other tile. But you're always going to need some bridges or tunnels in your network just to get over obstacles. So that's going to create, in this case, a huge 4-tile signal gap. And that's going to be a bottleneck for trains. So what can we do to fix that? This is where line sync or line synchronization comes in. So what we can do is build another bridge in parallel to the first bridge and connect them up like so. Now, when we let the trains go, we can see that they're evenly split between the 2 bridges, and the bridges share the load, so there's no longer a bottleneck here. So I built the bridges in a sort of strange way where the line gets shifted over by 1 tile. And that's because by doing it this way, the length of the 2 paths are kept exactly the same. And this means that a train going on one path will be synchronized with the train going on the other path. If we just stick another bridge next to the first one like this, the diagonal tracks will make that path longer. So trains that are close to each other might block each other and cause a jam out of nowhere. So this isn't how we build an OpenTTD coop, though it's actually not that bad to have lines that are out of sync like this. So in personal games, I will build like this sometimes. So there are a lot of different ways to build tracks in sync. So here's the way I showed before that offsets by 1. You can also split off in both directions and join back together in the middle, which keeps the track aligned. And there's also the X. You can add an X if there are multiple sets of bridges, and that'll keep the track aligned as well. And we have the path-based signals here to separate the left and right bridges, the second pair. Block signals wouldn't work because it forms one big block. And here's another example of an X-based sync that uses an X in the middle and keeps everything aligned, but diagonally. So next, some notes about signaling these designs. So on the exit side, you will always need room for signals on each of the parallel tracks. However, on the entrance side, you have some choices. Now, I used to always use PBS signals because, as you can see, you can save a tile of space this way. However, sometimes PBS signals can be slow and trains can pause at them for a moment before they decide what to do next. So now I try to use block signals whenever I can. So with the basic block signals, this usually works fine, but if there are jams further down the line and trains are waiting on these bridges, it can be good to use an entry and 2 exit signals to keep track, to just make sure that a train will wait here before it chooses which track to take. And you can also do that with a PBS signal. Sometimes, for really big obstacles, you'll need more than 2 bridges. So for example, if we're building a bridge over this bay here, we might need 3 or even 4 bridges depending on our train length. and then we can make sure to keep them in sync at the ends. So something like this. So, to figure out how many bridges you need for a certain gap, I've created this web tool at openttdcoop.github.io/gap. So you can just enter the train length and gap size, and that will give you the number of bridges or tunnels you need. So for example, if we have trains of length 6 and a gap size of 23, we can see that we need 4 bridges or tunnels. And that's actually the example I've built here. So if we put our initial split and our exit signals, the length of the gap is measured from the tile that the last signal is on to the tile right after the entrance signal. So this is a gap of 26. But because your tracks are not going to be 100% saturated with trains, you can usually get away with 1 fewer bridge or tunnel, just because there are gaps between trains. And I want to make one more note about situations when you have 5 or more tracks that are in parallel. So here's the current OpenTTD Coop game, and we can see I built this hub here, and it has some tracks that go really long, 30 tiles underneath the hub. And here we have 5 tracks in parallel, and just to make sure that a train going down on the branch won't block other trains that are trying to go down the branch, I've split it up into 2 diagonal paths here. So this is an important thing to do if you have 5 or more. And you can see on the other side, I did a similar thing. So this basically splits 1 tree of 6 into 2 trees of 3 each. Anyway, you probably won't run into situations where you have that many lines in parallel that much. You can also see in the middle, we have these pairs of 4 lines that are in sync in a kind of clever way on top of each other with tunnels. So that brings us to the end of this video on line sync and signal spacing. So I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider subscribing if you aren't already. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.